Okay, so I did a drawing of the apple, and it's a very light drawing. It's pretty simple because it's just a leaf and a round shape and a stem. The main thing is I want to work with a wet and wet technique. So I'm going to take my water and move my water so it's more convenient. And with a big brush, I'm going to wet the shape of the apple. Not the leaf, just the apple. The principle here is that the paint will not flow into the dry area. If I drop color into the wet area, it will be confined to the shape of the wet area. So when you're doing a painting of an apple, that's perfect. Just a big round circle of water. Okay, and I chose this particular apple because it has some yellow green on one side and red on the other side. So I'm going to start with the yellow, the kind of yellow green. And as far as the colors I'm using, I would use a color that would be sort of a color that would be like a lemon yellow or something be more toward the green. And you can add a little bit of cobalt blue to it if you want to make it even a little more lime green. Now I'm just dropping the color in to the side that has the yellow green. And it looks like my water puddled a little bit down at the bottom, but I'll put a shadow under there so it won't be a big deal. I'll move my palette a little so you can see it a little bit. The principle of working with watercolor is that you're going to start with your lighter colors first, working from light to dark. So that's why I chose to start with the yellow. I'm going to add a little bit of a warmer yellow, something that's a little more toward an orange right now. And keeping in mind that watercolor will dry lighter than it looks when it's wet. It's okay to go just a little bit darker. And it looks like it needs to be a little more green, so I'm going to add a little bit more of a, maybe I'll add a little bit of a sap green in there. Very, very thin. I'm letting the color kind of go together on the paper instead of trying to mix it as much on my palette. And use a paper towel to dab up any extra paint that gets out of the line. Okay, now I'm going to add some red. And I have a warmer red here. I'm not sure which one, but it'd be something like a Scarlet Lake or a flame red kind of a thing. It's okay to leave some of the white of the paper to fill in with some of the yellow later.
Sylvia, is your paper textured or smooth?
It's a cold press. That's got a little bit of texture. This is my brush sort of in the shape of the form of the apple. It's a sort of a curved shape with the red. I'm going to switch to a smaller bowl. there's a paper still quite wet, but there's a technique I want to use, which means that I will like spread my brush out a little bit like this and kind of drag it in places because it will give it more of a softer, kind of a feathered look. And as it dries, I'm going to start adding some brighter color. I'm going to go into a cooler red now, probably cad red. It's a little brighter. And I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of salt on here because it's got texture. What I'm hoping is it'll go back to the yellow-green instead of the white of the paper. I think I could start painting the leaf just because I want to get a little bit more of the overall color involved. I have to wait for the rest of the apple to dry. I'm leaving a little bit of some little white lines, but I plan also to try to scratch back in to create the veins. And if I can't do that, I'll come back in with some white gouache later. Still wet. You can add some darker darks to the edges. Well, hello, sweetheart.
Sylvia, can you tell us what greens you're using?
Yeah, it's sap green.
And are you mixing it with something to make it that dark?
No,
It's just your water saturation.
yeah. My favorite dark green is Hooker's green, but I haven't used it on this yet. Okay, so I want to scratch back into it, but you have to be careful about when you do that, because if you do it too soon, it'll make a dark line and kind of critical. So I've got a brush that has a angled end on it. It's got like a 45-degree angle, you see. And I'll just show you what happens if I scratch now into it. It's still a little bit too, at least in that dark part, it's a little too damp yet. So maybe in the part that's not quite so dark, I can scratch.
Sylvia,
Yes,
can you show us that tip again?
it's
The,
it's kind of an angled tip. This particular brush is a scrubber brush. You see,
oh, I
it's
see.
a bristle brush.
Thank you. Thank you.
Happens to be one of the brushes that comes with an end like this. So I think it's always a good thing to have. If you have a chance to look for a brush that has that, it'll come in handy. So it's still a little bit too wet for me to do very much, but in places I can start to pull out veins, and you don't want it to be a solid line anyway. So if it's a little bit broken, that's okay. Okay, so I think it's the salt worked really well to give it a little bit of a textured technique, or sort of like what I see on the apple. Um, I don't know if you can see it very well. I can hold it up a little closer, but it kind of breaks it up into little darker color and lighter. And this is just plain table salt. So now that it's a little more dry, I'm going to come back in now and start doing, well, first of all, I might try the scraping just a little bit where I see some lighter areas here. See if it's going to work. I think it's too dry now. That's okay. So up here, I'm going to do some line work. Try to define that shape, the curve of the apple. then spread my brush out slightly, like I showed you before. This is called feathering.
Do you do that feathering with a dry brush?
It's a little bit dry, yeah. I'm noticing it's a lot more contrasty on this. The document camera is probably not meant for art videos, but the college has let me borrow one, and so I thought I'd try it. But the contrast on the image I'm seeing here is much, much more defined than what it's actually on my painting. So my edges are softer on my actual painting.
Sylvia, you're just painting right over the salt that you put on?
Yes. I'm going to add a little bit more green to the yellow green to the apple because it feels like it's a little washed out. And come back in with some yellow and some of the other sections too. Okay, well, I'm waiting for that to dry. I'm going to, I have to wait for this one side, the yellow side, to dry because I need to add some red on top of it to kind of go make that whole shot work. So in the meantime, I'm going to paint the stem. I'm going to take a couple minute break here to take care of my kitty. Okay, come on over now. I'm going to go ahead and put a shadow in underneath because it bothers me that the shape of the bottom of the apple isn't right. I have to do something with it. Okay, so now as it gets more and more dry, I'm going to start doing sort of a little stippling effect in this area where it's more toward the center of the apple. Because it's still the stippling is kind of softened edges because the paper is still a little bit damp. I'm doing a little bit of stippling with green, but not much. Just a little bit over on the side here where it's blending between the red and the green. Gonna put a little more of a yellow green up here now near the core of the apple, where the stem meets the rest of the apple. Now I have a brush called, it's a script brush or a rigger brush. It's very skinny. I'm going to use this now. I'm going to add a little bit of more darks to the stem. Mixing some ultramarine blue and some burnt sienna. Have to be careful it doesn't touch the part that I just painted though where I added the yellow. And I'll go back in now, work on the leaf a little bit. And here I will put in a little hooker's green, which is darker, but it's also brighter. So I'll add a little bit of ultramarine blue to that.
Sylvia, can you mute everyone, please?
Can I what?
Mute everyone?
Oh yeah, I can.
Thank you.
Second. So I'm using what's called negative space painting now to define some of the veins in the leaves by painting around, painting and leaving the background color to define the shape. Now I think it's dry enough. I can use this rigger brush, script brush, to come back in and do a little bit more detailed work with the stripes, the shapes of the stripes.
That's spectacular.
Yeah, what Gina said, I concur.
Oh, really? You like it? You know,
Well, it's coming through on the screen awfully nice.
okay, good. It's funny because I'm noticing that it doesn't seem to, it looks like there are harder edges on here. And I'm not sure if it's just because it doesn't have a high resolution or what the reason would be, but I suppose a document camera might be different than a video camera. Anyway, it's fun to do this. I know that.
Hmm.
Now, I'm tempted
Well,
because,
it's working, whatever it is.
I'm not sure what would happen. I'm really tempted to spray part of it with this. You see the part that bothers me, that where it looks like their edges are too dark or too abrupt. I have two ways I could go. I could either spray it or I could take a little bit of like my scrubber brush and try to lift a little bit on the edge. Maybe I'll do that first.
Looks perfect.
Like places like this where it looks a little bit too hard edged, just to soften it a little bit. Okay, I think it's dry enough now for me to define the shadow a little more. Oops, I don't want it to go back up into the apple. I think it's kind of damp in that one spot. Sometimes it's not what's on the actual form as much as what's up next to it that helps to create the illusion of volume. And so that's what I'm trying to do now, is to fix the edge of the bottom of the apple so that it'll look more like it's a three-dimensional object.
What was that you just put in? Is it a Payne's gray or something?
No, it was ultramarine blue, and then I added burnt sienna.
Ah, excellent.
You know, the funny thing is, you know, the color that you're seeing is not the color that I'm seeing. I look at on my monitor, it's
Oh,
really kind of funny how the difference. But I can see now that I'm going to have to come back in and either scrape the bottom of the apple a little bit or add some gouache when it's dry in the part that's bleeding, you know. But that's something that I can do later on. And
mhm.
you know, one thing that might be kind of fun to try, just because this is kind of a
Well,
demo.
it was looking blue until you did that second
I was looking too blue.
stroke.
Yeah, I agree. It was on mine too. Is I'm going to take my toothbrush now and I'm going to spatter a little bit because I see these little red spots, these little red speckles. And I just want to see if I can do that without ruining it. And I'm going to take a paper towel and to protect parts that I don't want it to go on.
Do you have salt still on your apple, or did it just dissolve?
I do. I still have some salt on there. Okay. I kind of like that effect. A little more random, you know.
Yeah.
And then there are some places where I'll need to maybe even spatter with a little gouache so it'll break up that. Like if I mix a little gouache with the green, I'm going to try that. A little bit of the white gouache. With some of the green, kind of the yellow green. And then take my toothbrush and dip it in there. Not quite green enough.